Hello and welcome to a short introduction of the pet tool for Photoshop. Let's start with the very basics. You can take your object, your layer. It doesn't matter if you have a normal layer, smart object or text layer, or even a vectorized layer. You just place it at one of the four sides and you can press repeat and it will automatically create a new layer and repeat your object. If you now define a pattern like you would normally do, and if you now apply the pattern to your blank canvas, you can see that you created a repeatable pattern with just one click. But it doesn't stop there. You can choose each side of the canvas and you can get a repeating pattern even if you place it in the corners. It will automatically make a repeatable pattern out of it. You have also different functions to position your object randomly if you need so. You can apply random rotation to your object and even apply random sizing to your object. But please note it's random, so it will give you a different result each time you press the button. There are different predefined patterns, as by now there are only two predefined patterns, a half drop and a sample pattern. If you choose your layer and press on the half drop, it will automatically create a half drop depending on the size of your canvas and the size of your layer. If you have a really big layer, it will do a couple, it will create a lot more layers because it has to place them in the right space. If you have smaller layers, it will make less layers. Each predefined pattern is able to generate a number of varieties of pattern depending on how many layers you select. Your basic half drop pattern is right now able to take up to 3 different layers, and the first sample pattern is able to take up to 9 different layers. So for instance, if I select all of the 5 layers I have right here, it will create a pattern out of them. But let's go a step back, and if I just choose 2 of them and make the other ones invisible, it will take them and create a different pattern out of them by just using just the 2 layers I selected. Same goes for the half drop. If I'll take a step back and I choose, let's say, 1 out of the 5 layers I have, it will create a basic half drop. But if I create 2 layers, or if I choose 2 layers, make another half drop pattern out of it. And if I now take 3 layers, it will make a whole another half drop version out of them. You can also use a number of different functions of the pet extension. For instance, you can use the page filler and create a filling of the page with your layer you selected. You just have to type in some item spacing, that means the spacing between each item, and align spacing means that you have spacing between the lines, and you can also add a rotation. If you activate the on-off switches, the numbers will be randomized between each layer you create. If we now press start, it will arrange the layer we selected over the page, and we'll do it as we typed in. You have to be careful with this function. It's not a repeatable pattern, it's just a draft. It's just a draft. You can also use a border generator, and if you press here, it will create a border draft on the horizontal line. If you select the second button, it will, let's go one step back, it will create a vertical border recommendation for you. And you can also type in some subtractional spacing. That means it will bring your objects closer together. Let's see. Now you see your objects are closer together and you get a different result. You can also create a fading effect. That means you can either choose, it should do a opacity fading, and it also can do size fading, means your object gets smaller or bigger the lower it gets. Or you can just do an object jitter, which means that it will select a random value for each object and will place it accordingly. Let's see how it works. Here we go. Now it took one layer, I selected and created a fading effect, once with the opacity, and on the other hand it enlarged the object line by line. You can also use like a circular arrangement. For that you have to place your object in one spot you like, and you can press start for a automatic spacing around the circle. It always positions the layer around the center of the canvas. If I press start, it will do a circle arrangement, and depending on where you place your layer, it will do different arrangements. But you can also just place your layer here and say a certain count that you want, for instance 5 layers, and it will make an arrangement with 5 layers. You can also use the spiral generator to generate a spiral. You have to consider that depending on the size of your canvas, you have to type in different numbers. The spiral generator will use your layer as a reference point on where to start. So let's say we type in 2, or let's say 5, make spacing steps 5, starting offset will be 100, because we're right now working with pixels. We'll do row spacing 1, and we'll want 50 objects for our spiral. I will just press start and wait a couple seconds, and here we go, we got a spiral. Now you can change each and every object in your spiral, maybe change a color or just reposition it where you want it to be. There is a position jitter you can use to randomly position your layers. You just have to select the layers you want to position randomly, type in the count, in other words how many objects you want to be generated. Let's say for this one 20 objects. You have a size jitter. That means if you do 100, it will also, if you do 100, it will just shrink your object. If you want also bigger objects, you have to go over 100. And you can type in a rotation value for your object, and you have to turn it on if you want them rotated. It will do the rotation randomly for each object. If we now press start, you can see that it places your objects randomly and rotates them. and this already created a repeatable pattern. So in other words, you can just define your pattern and use it right out of the box. If you say apply pattern, and there we go, you have a repeatable pattern. The position jitter works with as many objects you like, but you have to be careful. If you choose 20 objects and you choose 20 objects to be generated, it will create 20 objects for each object you selected. In other words, you will get 400 objects, and that might take a little bit. There are additional auto-completion tools. If you want to work with them, be careful. Sometimes they might not work depending on how you work in Photoshop. You can have a complete pattern tool. It's just scanning the whole document for objects that are located at the border of your document, and if you select it, it will automatically scan every layer and finish your pattern for you, so you don't have to select each object individually and just can press finish once. There's also an option for screen printing. If you do screen prints and you work with single layers, you can just select screen printing and convert your pattern into a screen printing pattern. You have to be careful with this function because it relies on, first of all, that you have single layers, so each layer has a corresponding pair, and your pattern has to be correct in order for this function to work. There's also a function that can check your pattern and check for errors or mistakes, but also you have to have the certain workflow, so you have to use single layers and each layer has to have a pair. If you work like this, it can detect a mistake. If I just move that over, it would be a clear mistake, and if I press start right now, it will tell you that there is a mistake, and it also colorized the layers that are wrong. If we check here, these are the two layers, they're wrong, and it color marked them correctly. As you might mention all the time, if I press a start button and did something, there's always a go back sign that appears at the top. It is very useful if you have functions that generate more than one or two layers and exceed the limit of your history, so you can go back multiple steps and don't lose something you did earlier and you might want to go back to. There are a couple preferences. You can switch to a smaller random and repeat button, as you see right here. You can also pack your generated layers into a folder. If I delete them all, just take one, and let's say generate here. It will pack all the newly generated layers in one folder, and you can just hide them in one step. And there is also a preference that you can put the reference layer, that means the original layer, into the folder as well in one step. There is also a function that makes a color separation for you in Photoshop. If you see right here, here is the result of the finished color separation. Let's Let's go back. The color separation depends on how exactly you choose your colors and the color steps. I will show it to you, but it really depends on how precise you work in this automated function. So at first it asks you how many colors you want to separate, and we will pick 2 colors for this and say start. And now it asks you to select the first color with the selection finger, and it will also ask you to turn down the hue and to -100%, so you can actually see what you selected. Let's take this selection finger and we select one tone of blue. If we now turn down the hue, we can see what we select because it will turn black. Let's say we want the dark blue for this one. Let's press OK. And then we have to select the second one. Click again on the finger. Select the light blue and turn it down to 0 or to -100 and press OK, and it will automatically select the black layer. If we now fill it with black, and we got 2 blue tones. Let's select one blue tone here, and let's select one blue tone here. So, and there's our finished separation of the colors. And there's our finished color separation. You have to color the bottom layer as desired in order to work the best. A little tip as a side note is, if you want a better result, you have to select your mask layer and go to corrections and do a level correction and brighten up your mask, and then you will get stronger colors and a better separation result. If you have any problems while using the program, please contact me directly via the email I provided on Adobe Exchange.